Okay.
We are inside of the 10-year mark since the tragic murder of Michael Brown. And they have received some significant wins as of recently. So we are fortunate to have Montague on the panel and eager to hear his remarks and comments. We are also joined to his left side Judith Brown Dianis, who currently serves as the Executive Director of the Advancement Project. We want to do weekend movement of law-abiding organizations. Judith has been inside of the movement for, I'll probably say, a long time. She doesn't want to say years. Come on, bro. Come on. A decade long. She did it. She has it only since 17, so you can see how deep this goes. So decades-long worker, civil rights worker inside of particularly racial justice and Black movement sectors. So we're eager to hear from her. To our left, we are joined by the esteemed Courtland, civil rights icon. One of the community workers of the civil rights movement, helped to lead a lot of groundbreaking work on that time. Currently serves as the chair of the Smith Legacy Project, who is still just as active today as it was back in the 60s and the 50s and the 70s and so on. So we are fortunate to be here with history in the flesh. And then joined to his left is my fearless leader, the incomparable Janai Nelson, who currently serves as the 8th President and Director-Counsel of the Legal Defense Fund. He has been a civil rights lawyer for decades, currently is a leader, what I would like to believe is a renaissance of the Legal Defense Fund, as we do a lot of both impact work, but also, quite frankly, integrated advocacy work, in the way in which we think about how to attack some of the most pressing racial justice issues of our time. And then joined to her left will be the Congresswoman Cori, who serves as the Congresswoman for the 1st Congressional District of Missouri, state of Missouri. She also hails from St. Louis, from Ferguson, Simmons, and Montague. I like to say, I don't know if the Congresswoman will agree with this terminology, but I like to say that she got radicalized in the streets of Ferguson. And that is a part of what propels her to engage in public office. We'll let her tell her story once she actually arrives. So this is the panel lineup that we have for you all today. And we are going to be grappling with some of the most pressing questions facing racial justice, civil rights, and Black movement today. And so I want to start off first by giving each of the panelists the opportunity to answer this opening question. And we'll start with Montague since you are immediately to my left. Many in this country feel that we are living through dark times right now. The weight of anti-Black racism, voter suppression, extrajudicial police murders, and the constant assaults on Black and marginalized people's freedoms, particularly most recently by the Supreme Court, continues to set racial justice progress backwards and shine a light on how deeply flawed American democracy actually is. Yet individuals such as yourselves continue to show up every day, determined to fight for a democracy that is fair, that is inclusive, that is just to us all. Could you share how you would define the current state of our democracy as we venture further into the 2024 election season? What are the challenges that we must face ahead, and whose voices and interests is currently being served in our democracy?
Hey, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Oh, there you go. All right. Thank you, Trey.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just want to be sure that I stay on track. Just an easy question to start with. So earlier we were having a discussion around the state of our democracy, the state of our movements, and a similar question was posed around how we characterize this moment. And I suggested there that generations from now, they're going to look back at the work that we've seen, and we were talking about the last 20 years, and likely framing as if there will be Reconstruction. That's language that you've heard amongst the left, and especially the black left, for at least the last decade or so, and we've been thinking about the way things have actually been moving. But also like understanding the fact that we've actually experienced like several ruptures, several expansions, several moments of contraction, and understanding that for the last 20 years, like things have actually come to a head in a real way. In that conversation, we spoke specifically about the anti-war movement and militarism, and the way that as militarism began to expand in the wake of 9/11, it also took a deepening footprint in the U.S. in communities around the country. At the same time, we saw deepening austerity in communities around the country. This is part of what we talk about as kindling, or what became the uprisings that I finished directing in St. Louis. But out of that moment, part of what happened was there was a broader appetite for communities that had largely been often relegated to the bottom of the priority list to assert, and certain ways that we had not had the power to do before. We showed up not only in the streets, but we've been advancing policy, we've actually been advancing champions like Cori, who's going to be joining us. And what we've seen in response to that is capital on both sides of the aisle wrestling to maintain their power. And I say that because it's important for us to make the connection that part of what we struggle against is not just the individual parties, it's literally a contention for power and for our vision in the space. Like we have opportunity, but this moment is also rife with risk.
Wow, that was a really good on time and powerful. So you are up next. Could you define sort of how you would define the current state of our democracy as we go to further into the 24 actions? What other challenges that we face well, and who's the certificate served?
Sure. Well, thanks first, Trey, and to LDF for putting this panel together. And it's great to be here with my people. So, these are my people. When I look at this moment, I think of it as, I just pick up on this third instruction, that we are witnessing the last vicious stand of white supremacy. And that white supremacy is digging in its heels like it has done before. It's not the first time that people felt like we were at the moment where it was about to crumble. And I think that that has happened because our movements have gotten stronger. We have more alliances, we have more solidarity. The browning of America and the demographics of America, the way this thing could play out, right? If we play our cards right on the progressive side, has made those who want to uphold and who white supremacy and to benefit from white supremacy feel that they have to dig in their heels. And again, that's because we have been winning. We have seen people take on the police in ways that we haven't seen in decades. When I think about the young people who were on the streets of Ferguson and Baltimore, standing toe-to-toe with the police, knowing that they could get killed in a second and they can get away with it, but people having the courage to do that because they know that if we topple the police, we can actually get to our freedom. And so the courage to do that. And at the same time, what we are seeing is this doubling down on fascism to meet us back. And that doubling down looks like trying to roll back all the wins and victories of the civil rights movement, all the work that people like Courtland have done, and Bob Moses and others, all the work that has been done by organizations like the Legal Defense Fund and the courts, it all on the line right now because they have been strategic about the way that they're taking it down and trying to take it over. And that they know that they have to, repression requires that they shut us up, that there is no dissent, that McCarthyism has to come back, and that they have to squash our movement because it's too damn strong. But the beautiful thing is that we have never been, for Black people, no one has ever been able to squash us. We come back because we know what is on the line and we know how to fight for freedom.
For the past 80 years, we've been engaged in the struggle to define America. And the connection between what was done by the Legal Defense Fund and what was done by Black Lives Matter is very clear. It's part of an 80-year struggle that has various highs and various lows, but it's a continuing struggle. And the struggle is about who gets to define America. That's what this is about. Whose laws and whose beliefs will dominate America? Because if I establish belief, and if I establish a frame of reference, I don't care what the specifics are, I will always win. And so that is the real battle. We need to understand who gets to define America is the real issue. I just don't want to, and there are 5 big battles that we can say that we've been engaging, and I agree with everything that Judith just said. We're winning, and we're stronger than ever now. But I want to go over some of the battles that got us to this point. The first really comes after World War II, soldiers served in World War II. And a number of them, and a number of Black men and Black women decided that if they were going to fight fascism overseas, they were going to fight it here. So they established the EE program. And at the end of the day, it was the NAACP, Legal Defense Fund, that took the leadership in that particular area and really was very successful in terms of Brown v. Board legislation. The second area was when I came along, my generation, with the cities and public accommodations. And we, in fact, challenged whether, in fact, we had a right to be treated in the public spaces the way everybody does. Third is the question of the fight for one person, one vote, which took place and we engaged and we won that. The other is Black Power, and the fifth one is Black Lives Matter. One of the things that we have to understand, there is a connection between what started 80 years ago and what's happening today and tomorrow. And the other thing that needs to be said is, whenever we fight, we win. And we have to understand we have to fight in order to win.
Good afternoon, Netroots. How are you all doing? Good. It's good to see everybody. And I just want to thank Trey for organizing this panel. I want to thank all of my comrades here on this panel for lending their wisdom and voice to this Netroots conference and for you all being here. This panel is called The Power to Define. I could not agree with Brother Courtland more that this moment is about who defines not just the future of this country, but how we operate going forward, what the laws and rules and norms and morals of this country will be. And it isn't unlike other times when we have been at a moment of truth for this country in terms of its future. But there is something a little bit different about this moment. Because of the work that so many have done through the different movements that Brother Courtland laid out, we have helped to perfect this democracy, we have helped to expand it, we have created new principles for this democracy, and people of color are finally becoming sizable enough to use those mechanisms in ways that can completely shift the balance of power in this country if we don't have obstacles to using them, right? So we've actually created an apparatus that is more inclusive, that is more equitable. It's not perfect, but it's so much more than it was at our founding. And we are finally at a moment where we can inhabit those spaces and utilize those principles and use the fruits of our labor in ways that can transform this country. And that is why there's so much fear. That is why there's so much concern, because while demographics are not destiny, demographics plus democracy will take us further than we've ever been. And people are very fearful of that. And so I think we are in a moment that is really a possible refounding of this whole country. A refounding by the people who will occupy its future, who will ultimately be the people who inherit this moment and everything that we make of it. Which is why, even though, as you said, Trey, these are dark times, these are challenging times, these are disappointing times, these are distressing times, they can even be depressing times. But they have so much potential if we use it right. If we believe that we have in us what our four people have in them, if we can build on the strategies and movements that they have created to get us where we are today, that stand as models for us, and if we have enough confidence in our vision and what we've done thus far with this country, I think this is a moment of incredible transformation and refounding of this country, which is what I know we at the Legal Defense Fund are all fighting for, and what we believe we are fully capable of.
And welcome, Congresswoman Cori. I must say, what you did before, because I did a brief intro of you, and hopefully it did you justice. I did say that your direct process is stupid practicing, which I've heard you say before, so it is accurate. But we are on the first opening question. If you want to talk, we started out how we are experiencing dark times right now. And we're being crushed. With the way of recognizing the anti-black racism that is seeping in all aspects of our country. But even with that, we are talking about what the current state of our democracy is as we venture further into this kind of election season, what challenges we must face that are coming up on the horizon, and whose interest is currently being served.
So first off, thank you to Netroots for this insight. Thank all of you for being here. Shout out to LDF and appreciate you, Janai, everyone. And all the folks up here on the panel, you all do such amazing work. And we all do this together. Everyone's sitting here and we feed the only money that's on. Thank you for what you do. Every day I get to go into these hallways with these marble floors and these paintings of people who don't look like me. Paintings where we celebrate people who would have treated me most likely less than human. And we get to walk past that every day, and we get to go into committee hearing rooms where we hear some of the most racist, misogynistic, bigoted, hateful things about human beings. And it's different now than just a few years ago when I first entered Congress. But mind you, my better day was the insurrection. Right? Yeah, I heard there was the insurrection. And let me just say, there were 2 members of Congress who did not have a panic button or an enunciator to even never someone outside. That was myself, and now I'm the president. Some facing out of 535, all this is thing is 2 of us. But even then, since the insurrection, I have seen this shift, but a very swift shift towards fascism. Not that it wasn't there before, but it is so overt. And they're trying to make it normal. But this is the normal day-to-day language and the normal way that we speak about people, and this is how we want to govern. And we're being expected to go on with the day with business as usual to try to govern. I am pissed off that this is our government. I'm pissed off that these are the people who made the decision to sign up to represent all people. That's the part that really gets me. Because when you decide to run for office, you're saying that everybody in this, in this district, I'm going to represent. But many of these folks have decided that in my district, I only want to represent certain folks. And then other folks, I am okay causing harm to. That is where we are right now. And with Project 2025, it's not some fake thing. It's not something that can't happen. It is something that they are already working on. It's something that is happening in Congress. It is a part of so many bills that we have had to vote against. That it's very real, but I'll say this. The hope is that we are here. The hope is that we will continue to galvanize. The hope is that we won't back down. The hope is that the people are the ones who shape this country, but we just have to stay together, and we have to have the courage, and we have to have the moxie, and we have to have the fearlessness to stand against it, no matter where it is, or no matter what the repercussion. And that's something that we all don't have or want to do.
Thank you so much. So, Montague, I want to come back to you briefly because something that the Congresswoman mentioned about 2025, prior to 2025, I think resonates well with the work that Women for Black Lives is doing currently to counter that. So, it's safe to say that in many respects, Women for Black Lives was created in response to our fallen community members. Particularly the Ninth Round uprising when millions of people took to the streets to demand justice for our fallen comrade. Since MFBL's inception, it has always elevated a power-building analysis with the central objective of contending with governing power to impact the lives of marginalized Black communities. Can you share with us a little bit about how Movement for Black Lives has chosen to both define power and the ways in which that Movement for Black Lives as an ecosystem is contending for power that is, sort of combating some of the worst of us driving by the project on the driving?
Okay, I'll try. So first, I think it's important to make clear what InfoBL is. On one hand, we are an organization that has staff, but at its heart, we are literally an ecosystem of organizations who come together to coordinate, debate, struggle, and build cohesive strategy together. We were literally born out of what Cori was shaped in, so many folks in St. Louis and around the country were catalyzed in 2014 in the uprisings in the wake of the death and the murder of Michael and June. What happened in that space is that organizers and organizations around the country not only came in, but made a commitment to working with strategy together. There were successes, beautiful successes that we've been able to advance. But one of the things we had to sit with after the 2016 election was real gaps in our power and in our ability to actually set agendas, which is how we typically talk about power. The ability of communities to actually set and control agendas, to control the institutions that exist in those communities, to not only mitigate harm, but to actually create conditions for people to thrive. In the wake of that, we launched what can be known as Project 2024, Black Power Rising, which aimed under 5 pillars to do a broad amount of mass engagement to reach 10% of Black folks, to train upwards of 50,000 organizers, to build multiracial solidarity, to engage on electoral justice, and other organizations that have ranged from 60 to 120. We need massive pivots in growth. This year, we've actually launched something to begin to test the cohesion of that, but we're also listening with response to the demands that we've advanced. Cop City didn't come out of nowhere. It's a direct response to our call to defund and divest the police. But we're seeing in terms of the increase in militarism is a direct response to the work we've been leading over the last decade at home. So if we can go deeper, I know we'll circle that.
Thank you for that. I actually want to pivot over to Courtland for a second. So, 2020 is not only a critical election year, but it also marks a number of historical milestones, right? Including the 70th anniversary of Brownsville Board of Education, the 60th anniversary of the Historic Freedom Summit Project, which SNCC founded and was beaten, as well as, of course, as we mentioned before, the 10th anniversary of Matt Brown tragic murder. So, Courtland, given what you have already heard from this esteemed panel, and as a student of history, maybe a living history textbook, can you talk with us a little bit around the lessons that we can draw from the civil rights era and the successes of the civil rights movement, and how we can implement those lessons today in our efforts to build Black lives?
Okay, I'll try to do so. I mean, as I look at the election, the most dangerous word and the one that disturbs me the most is again, the word again. And the reason is that those who talk about MAGA and again, one will go back to a time when in fact it was unbridled and they had unbridled power. And one of the things, it's just a little personal, one of the things I got in the movement, the first thing that really struck me, I was 14 years old, the same year that Emmett Till got killed. And I was riding the subway reading Jet magazine. I don't know what Jet magazine. What's up? So that was the journal of Negro education. So my sense is that what is important, and and I was thinking about it coming over here. We knew that Emmett Till, anybody who killed Emmett Till, there would be no accountability. There would be, be knowing that they would laugh at us and so forth. And at the end of the day, one of the things as I think about it is that the movement for Black Lives resolved the issue that we have to face. Because for the first time, they introduced accountability into the discussion about Black men and Black women being murdered. And young people who engaged in that movement need to understand the importance of this question that they did in terms of helping to define America, whether in fact there should be accountability in terms of the murder. And when I look back at it, the Black Lives Movement resolved the issue that I had when I joined the movement. I think the other thing that we need to understand is that, even though, and I've been involved in a lot of stuff, I helped to organize the March on Washington. I worked in Freedom Summer, 1964. I worked at Lowndes County in 1965. I was engaged in all of it. But I understand two things. First, that even if you succeed and everything that you think is necessary is done, it will not be sufficient. There will be something else to be done, and you should not be frustrated. The second thing is that what is important is determination. When I look at the women in 1955 who engaged in the bus boycott, they took a year, it was determination. The whole thing in led up to Brown versus Board of Education, it wasn't something that was immediate. Everything that we've done takes determination and it takes time. So people need to understand that. They shouldn't be frustrated. They need to understand they're in a battle, and that battle has to be won. And they need to be diligent and determined.
Thank you for that. So, Bart, I'm going to come to you next today. We talked a lot around what it means to define. We talked a lot about lessons learned from the civil rights movement, and it's been referenced a couple of times around the Brown decision, right, as Courtland likes to call it. But Brown's versus Board of Education is a central milestone, a turning point within the civil rights movement. So if you could just talk a little bit around the impact of the Brown decision from the advantage part of the, the civil rights movement, but if you could just talk a little bit about your assessment around the impact of the Brown decision on the civil rights movement and how LDF is currently leveraging the power of integrated advocacy models to create major racial justice wins in the face of particularly a dangerous federal judiciary. But also, I would also venture to say, too, that one of the significant pieces of the Brown strategy was that it did not just rely on the court strategy, but it was deeply rooted inside of a community within the power builder strategy.
Yes, well, you asked and then answered your but let me just elucidate a little bit on what Trey just said. And yes, the Brown versus Board of Education decision it's impossible to overstate its importance to this country. Even though it has not solved all the problems of this country. And it always baffles me when people think that a single court decision is going to undo centuries of anti-Black racism and subjugation. And yet still, this one case did end legal apartheid in this country. It ended the ability of state governments to separate people by race, to treat them unequally by policy and law. Now, we all know that you can still enact laws that have the impact of making people unequal and denying people their rights. But we can no longer do it as overtly. And what Brown did was set up a framework that if we had really paid attention to it and honored it, we would be in a very different place today. Brown said that public education, a resource that all of us should have access to equally, based on formerly enslaved people creating freedom schools from their emancipation, starting the public school system. Brown said that public education is the foundation of good citizenship. And if we took that to its logical conclusion, every child in this country would have access to a good, quality, culturally inclusive public education that would teach them about civics and engagement, that would allow an electorate to grow, that could then hold the government accountable because they would have demands and be able to assess inequities and be able to help form and shape policies that would continue to evolve this country to a higher state. Brown would have done all of that because much of what was stated in Brown was a blueprint for a more inclusive and healthy democracy. But we know that that decision was resisted on the day it was issued. It took a second decision to get Brown to even do the basic thing of ending de jure segregation. And though that was followed by massive resistance across the South. We know that it took bloody struggles. It took young children putting their lives on the line. Parents being willing to sacrifice potentially their children's not only physical well-being, but we know certainly psychological well-being in order to integrate schools. And it's going to take that type of investment and bravery today. It's going to take that type of pushing back against the new massive resistance, which is Project 2025. Project 2025 is an effort to resist the power of the federal government, to resist the evolution of this country, and to resist the browning of America. And what we are all trying to do, new norms, new ideas of dignity and respect and equity. And so we need to think back to what Brown's full promise was, and we need to resurrect that and then add on to it. I don't like thinking about the past as being just this glorified period where everything is perfect, because it wasn't perfect, but we are to perfect it. And that's our charge today.
Thank you for that. So, but there is an assessment about getting inside the racial justice and civil rights sector and Black community sector that we are very good at calling questions to the political consciousness of this country. We in that in the aftermath of 2014, but aftermath of 2015, even in the aftermath of 2012, all of these folks here sparked, political consciousness inside of the mainstream media, the mainstream of America, where for the first time there was a question in the school that said about accountability. But right now, the other piece of the assessment is that we lack the power to actually be able to define the scope of the issue and implement our solutions, right? That is a sobering assessment that's on hold. Could you just talk a little bit around what you feel is one of the kids already knows, first of all, if you use that as a safety people that assess this or not. So one definitely would love to get close to an assessment itself. But could you talk a little bit around sort of this tension that exists, particularly within Black and marginalized communities around voting as a tactic to be able to get to the type of social transformation and change that win in the actual power, right? To be able to define, as everybody has said in America, right, in terms of its destruction, the tension that exists there, and in particular, how our tools and our arsenal has to transform to meet the current conditions where we are now faced, particularly with a federal judiciary that at one point, as Judith talked about, the courts being leveraged to the civil rights movement to be able to actually at least legally get something on paper, where now we can't even have that happening today, even in the current state of our federal judiciary. So I'm curious just, from your vantage point, about the tension between voting that exists with marginalized community as a central tactic to power, and then what has to transform inside our tactics to get us to the power to be able to define our scope of our own issues as well as implement.
There's a lot there. Well, I'll start with this. Power is everything. Especially when you ain't got it, right? Power can be everything. And, I look at the work that we do as least as a project, as we exist to build power. That voting is one tactic. It is one way to exercise the ability to get some power, but it is not the only way. And when I think about also, I want to just put it in the context of the moment that we're in, because what we are seeing is the other side is doing a consolidation of power. It's about a power grab. Project 2025 is just that, the consolidation of power, the dismantling of the federal government, because the federal government has been the government that was supposed to actually protect civil rights and protect the minority from states' rights. And what they want to do is make America great again means going back to states' rights. And I think that if we are looking at this moment, that we should look to the South. We should look to what the conditions that our people are living in the South as an example of the way that this country is going. And so in this moment, I do think that requires us to turn out our people to vote, because without voting, we wouldn't have Congresswoman Cori Bush. People turn out our vote. And, she plays an incredibly important role in Congress. That sister, I sat there and I said to him, I was like, that's my Congresswoman. I said, I want you to donate. All the time. And so that we have to have people like her in Congress. So that means that we have got to be able to vote. But here's the other thing. For me as a lawyer, I know that law school doesn't teach you about power at all. And that what my job is to run interference for the movement so that the movement can gain power. And that I will use litigation to that extent. That in fact litigation itself is a tool, but that the revolution will not be litigated. That I will bring cases to help people, but that organizing has to be centered to everything. That organizing is a way in which our people can get their voice, can actually dream together about the world that they want to create. And that my job is to back them up with everything that I can. with every tool of advocacy, but then also narrative and communications is critical. Because if we are able to move certain narratives, we can actually push the courts in a particular direction. It has happened before. When we look at gay marriage, that came out of a cultural shift. Not just brilliant lawyers who went to the court and said, we need gay marriage, but there was a shift. And so it is incumbent upon us to do the organizing, to turn out our people to vote, but to push the narratives and to bring litigation as a tool, as a tactic for something that helps our people, but also knowing that the law wasn't written by us or for us, but it was written to oppress us. And so our job is to gain power for our people so that we can rewrite the script.
And that you actually set up this next question perfectly. So Congresswoman Cori, but I think out of everyone on this panel, you hold a unique role, right? Where your role in creating a just, fair, and equitable democracy is different than the rest of us on this panel. Your role is one of governance inside of our democracy. As we talk about what it means to have the power to define, having government officials who are not only responsible to our cause, but also see it as their duty to carry our agendas forward in the highest forms of power. So could you just share with us a little bit around how you in particular, Congresswoman Cori, are leveraging your position in your governance power in service of advancing a social justice, racial justice agenda? And in particular, we all would love to hear just a little snippet around the People's Response Act, you know, how that was used as a tool, as a tactic, as a piece of policy, and speak inside of this idea around having governance power to be responsive to the cause of your people.
Yeah, so, first of all, thank you, Judith, and Shai, and I appreciate it. Sharing quickly. You know, I brought my whole self to the seat. My whole self. And I brought the self that was, the part of myself that was out there on the streets of Ferguson for those over 400 days. I brought that person, pushed her to the forefront of my personality. Like, I made sure that even though so much of that is wrapped around and all of in trauma, that is, and I know somebody's on psychoanalyze me, but that is how I walk through the day, every single day, because I think about what it was like to have those boots kicking me around the roundhouse and Real House Police. I think about the friend of mine who was held upside down and all the time hanging off of a baton during Ferguson. We were fighting to save Black lives, and I think about how the people in Congress really don't want to talk about that and have that conversation. They really don't want to do that work, and they really, really want to give every excuse down to, oh, the slogan is what hurts the movement. The slogan is what hurts the progress. Don't say defund the police because that's what hurts. Say reallocate, say divest, say all these other things, when actually the real issue is it still happens in this country today. But I think more and more actually is here, you know, but we're not going to go there. So because I showed up as my whole self, I call myself a politicist. I'm the politician and I'm the activist. I did not take off my activist act to be in Congress, and because of that, I said I wanted to bring the movement to Congress, and so I have, and so that's why we work with the people on this stage. When we talk about the People's Response Act, it happened because of the people on this stage, on this panel, because we didn't do it in a silo, because we worked together. We bounced the ideas off of one another, change this, fix that, how do we do this, what makes sense? Let's make sure that the lawyers are involved. We did that work. The people on this stage and people that they work with, we did this together. The People's Response Act, when we look at the Breathe Act and how the Breathe Act set the stage, and now we were able to take the Breathe Act and pull a piece of that and have the People's Response Act, which changes the conversation, but also it redefines what public safety actually is and puts it where it should be in public health. It helps us to see it as a public health issue. And not only that, we've seen all across the country where those communities that have implemented some type of that have implemented a non-carceral response to emergency calls. We see how that has saved lives, and so that's what we have to be. We have to look at not what only has been done. Yes, what was done before us. Yes, what were the great things? What were the mistakes? And then we use that to do better. But the thing is this: if we're not willing to be our whole self, it will never get there. Because so many people told me, you want to defund the police. That's all this is about. What it's about is safety. What it is about saving lives. And we can only do it when people are not afraid to stand up and do the pieces, do all the work that it takes to do that. And so now we can say we have saved lives because we do have, even though the People's Response Act has not passed yet through Congress, the bill has been introduced, the bill is being pushed, the bill is being moved all around Congress, and even though it hasn't happened, cities and communities across the country are actually implementing that type of work.
Ooh. So the last 2-minute question before we go to our closing question, because this has been a rich conversation, but we are running up on time. Courtland, you often talk about this concept around how what some people see as a problem, others see as a solution. And what some see as a solution, other people see as a problem. So I want you to talk about that, but I also want you to talk about that in the context of what Ella Baker has so eloquently put, which is that this movement is for us and her, right? And my assessment of her saying that was to be able to say to you and the other students that what you all see in front of y'all is not the sum total of the work, right? So I would love for you to just end us on that before we get into the final closing question.
Okay, so I guess probably the most used phrase in this political environment is democracy is on the ballot. But one of the things that strikes me is I've never been in an election where democracy wasn't on the ballot. And at the end of the day, the reason democracy is on the ballot is gets back to the question of who gets to define it. That is to say, whether we're going to have a country that maximizes profit for the rich, or whether we're going to have a country that supports the people, the majority of the people. And at the end of the day, when you listen, I've been in meetings where the leadership of the civil rights movement, they got confused as to which side they're on. But at the end of the day, we now have to define, because having Social Security should be a solution. Having Medicare and Medicaid and all the things that help us should be a solution. But there are a number of people in Congress who want to take it away because they want to argue that this country can't afford it. Their position is, if I don't use it, I don't pay for it. And one of the things we should understand is if we don't use it, we shouldn't pay for it either. I'm starting with wars. Why are we paying for wars? What we don't use? At the end of the day, it's to define. They build up all this national stuff. At the end, you've got to be able, and so now let's talk about this president election, 2024. Mons lately said, she said, I see people standing on the corners looking at the lights. I don't know why, it's the cars that hit you. We're all talking about Trump, but MAGA is the thing that's going to hit us. We're talking about infrastructure. It's not about an individual, and we have to understand this is not a race between two individuals. It's a race between who gets to define America. And we have to start with ourselves. What are our interests? Because every election is about whose political and economic interests will we serve. And we need to build that into our belief system. And we act on everything because as we turn to the question, what is a problem? The question is it in my interest? If it's not in my interest, it's a problem. If it is in my interest, it's a solution.
Thank you for that quality. All right. Before we get out of here, I want to give you all one final question to answer. And we'll start opposite with Congresswoman Cori come down the line. So given that we lack the power to define our issues and policy in the courts as a central tool, how do we define our against our people in the face of these values? Specifically, what does winning look like when we can no longer fully rely on the courts or the state or federal policies to protect our interests?
So, first of all, let me just say, and you didn't impeach some of the folks on the court, we need to expand the court and all of the things that we need to do there right now. But when we look at our wins, it takes me to several months ago when we first, my sister Rashida Tlaib and I, when we first introduced the ceasefire and resolution in Congress. When I say that was one of the toughest things I've ever done, and I have 2 kids that came out of my Bible, but this was unbelievable. I'm from the Ferguson uprising, all of the death threats and death attempts on my life, but this, they called us, the administration called us repugnant and disgraceful for saying that we wanted to stop bombs from dropping on humans and saying we don't like U.S. tax dollars being used for war. And then now, it is the policy of the administration a few months later. It's celebratory, no. But we have gotten to the point to where it won't move unless movement moves. Unless the movement moves so much of this, nothing will move. And so, when we looked at the win, so the courts didn't do that. The people did. The people did it. So we had people on the local level, state level, federal level, organizations, all of you all pushing, people in the streets. And so now where I know so many of our Palestinian community members and loved ones have said, we never felt this type of community and solidarity before. Our Muslim community, our Arab community, we've never felt it like this before in this country. And now they see the support, they see people galvanized to save their family members and to fight against anti-Palestinian hate and anti-Muslim hate in this country. So I have to say, even though it's not the win that we wanted, we know that over 400,000 and maybe even upwards of 170,000, we don't even know how many people have been killed. But we know that even though we can't take it as a celebratory win, it would not be where it is right now had it not been for the people in this work and for me and doing the work.
Well, we've had that question for a long time. We've had that question for a long time because for all the reasons that you heard today, it's, you've got brownie board, people that look static and point to a specific outcome. A lot of our work is subtle, it is behind the scenes, it is not raised up and glorified in the same way. We still carry about 200 desegregation cases as a result of Brown. Quiet little cases in the depths of the rural South, and we are in school districts still trying to right these persistent wrongs in public education. And that's an extension of Brown's. That work for me is just as important. And so I have to find wins by not only advancing, but protecting and ensuring that we don't lose ground. That's how we have to find wins too. When we are holding line, we are making sure we are not dragged backwards. that is critically important. And what I think is important for us, because I don't want anyone to walk out of this room and think that it is an either or, that it is the courts, or the movement, or government action, or anything else. It is everything together. It is symbiotic. I am not prepared to give up any bit of this apparatus. I'm not giving up the courts. I'm not giving up state and local legislatures. I'm not giving up Congress. And it's important to understand that we hold people like our brilliant Congresswoman here because of court decisions that say you can't mess around with her lines in a discriminatory way or else you will get sued and you will be held to account under the Voting Rights Act, right? There's grand civil rights legislation that makes a difference. There's grand litigation and civil rights legislation that produced 2 new Black majority congressional districts. So hopefully Cori can have some reinforcement in Congress after November when the state of Louisiana and the state of Alabama, because of the Supreme Court win, buttressed by organizing, buttressed by policy work, produced 2 majority Black districts. So it all works in tandem and it reinforces each aspect of this power building. And it's important that we see it that way and that we remain in conversation and in community and in concert in building Black political power. It is absolutely necessary that we bring every single tool we have to the fight and that we are everywhere. You could easily point to government and say, let's just give up. Congress is so infected. But where would we be if we didn't have Cori here? Where would we be if we didn't have Black prosecutors and county buildings? Right? Where would we be? We were everywhere trying to protect against anti-Black racism, against the hierarchy of patriarchy, all of the isms out there. We've got to be there and we've got to be working together. And so I call that open when we are in places and in spaces making a difference and changing the landscape.
Thank you. Courtland, how are you finding out this today? You didn't learn a whole lot of stuff. You didn't know that. You know what you doing?
We're making a closing statement. I think I'm defining win as ourselves being active. Because what we have to do is create the engine through the use of our time and energy. And because it's been stated by all the other panelists, there'll be issues, legal issues. There are going to be political issues. There are going to be other issues in various aspects of life. But what makes it important and pulls it together is that we have the internal energy ourselves to believe that we need to move our community in the best direction for that community. So as I think about the question of when, because as I said to you, I'm old enough to know that even if you succeed, there'll be something else necessary to be done. So the question is, we are, I just want to end this with this quote from Ms. Baker, now that Trey mentioned it. Ms. Baker said to us, we who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. You have to have that as a belief system. And to me, that's what I consider the victory, because there's no one that can take anything away from you if your belief system is strong. And if your belief system is we who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes, all the specifics that we want and to benefit our community will happen.
Yeah,
So, I think about the trajectory of movement, like even in the past 20 years, and think about all of the victories and the wins that sometimes people don't even think about as like a win, right? Like, I know we've got 3 new feminists in the room. I was there at the state capitol when the takeover happened. That was a win, that there was a takeover. When I think about the fact that we are actually talking about abolition in this country. Abolition. Getting rid of prisons and police in ways that we haven't talked about. We've changed the narrative. That movement did that, right? There were people who came before who set it out for us, what it means, what abolition means, but the fact that we're actually talking about it and that people are moving an agenda around it, including like the young people we support of the Police-Free Schools movement. We're national convener of that. And young people from high school are looking at police in their schools and removing them. And they don't even have voting power. These are young people. But they have a vision for the world that they want to see and live in. And so that is kind of the victory to me, is the fact that we are actually dreaming about what is possible in the midst of a time where it is hard to conceive of something that is beautiful, that brings us joy, in which we can thrive and be successful in. But the fact that we can continue to dream and think about what that is, to me, is a victory.
I'm actually kind of deep in a lot of what you said. I think the government question for me in 2014 and even in this moment is then which side are you on? And it's not even a question for us, because I think unfortunately the movement has inflated itself. Not to say everybody here identifies themselves as a movement, some of you are advocates, some of you, this is a spectrum, multi-tendency space. But in any case, you are a facilitator, an organizer, someone who's moving other people in the transformation. And more of those people in this moment are choosing the side of light and people, of peace, of a world without jails, of a world without war and genocide, in generations that don't have power yet. The generations ahead are more politically aligned with our vision than anybody else who's in power at this moment. Which means our job is to defend it for them. We have to invest in it for them. We have to do what it takes to get them in charge to make sure they bring this vision to life. That's what I'm doing.
Yes. And that is time to give it up our panelists.